up to Daf Yud Daled Amud Aleph, 4 lines down. We mentioned last time the Makkot, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Yitzchak in regards to Malkus. Rabbi Shmuel holds whether you're Chayiv Misas Bezdin or you're Chayiv Kares, either one you get Malkus. Rabbi Akiva disagreed, and Rabbi Akiva said Kares, if you're Chayiv Kares, you could get Malkus, but if you're Chayiv Misas Bezdin, you do not get Malkus, which we discussed last time on Yud Gimel Beis. Rabbi Yitzchak was the third opinion. Rabbi Yitzchak said that Kares, anytime a person's Chayiv Kares, there's no Malkus involved, which he's arguing on Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva. Seemingly, Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva both agreed that at least Chayiv Kares have Malkus with it. Rabbi Yitzchak is saying, no, you're only Chayiv Kares and not Malkus. Why is that? If you remember last time we learned, it's because the Psukim talk about all the forbidden relationships. It says you're Chayiv Kares if one has a forbidden relationship, including everything. And then it says a specific pasuk that says by Achoso, when it's talking about his sister, it says, and if one has relations with his sister, he's Chayiv Kares. So Rabbi Yitzchak's trying to understand, why did the Torah have to single out the sister and say the sister is Chayiv Kares? The sister is anyway part of the entire group of all the Arais which are Chayiv Kares. It's coming to tell you, Rabbi Yitzchak says, it's coming to tell me that you're only Chayiv Kares, but you're not Chayiv Malkus. This is a specific pasuk to tell you, not for what it says, but to tell you what it doesn't say. It's to tell you that you only get Kares and you don't get Malkus. This is the source of Rabbi Yitzchak, and like we just said, he's arguing on Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva. So this brings us to our Gemara. The Gemara is going to ask, according to Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, what do they do with this extra pasuk? Why does it say Kares by Achoso? What's the point in that? Because they hold you also get Malkus. So what's the point? So let's see the Gemara. The Gemara starts the 4th line. Rabbi Yitzchak Omer, Chayve Krisis Bechal Hayu. Chayve Krisis were included in the general situation of being Chayv Kares. V'lama Yatzes Kares Ba'achoso. There's all a quote of Rabbi Yitzchak in the Brisa. Why does it go out to tell me Kares by a sister? Ledona B'Kares V'lo Malkus. The point is to tell me you're Chayv Kares and not Malkus. That's why the Torah says, specifically, you get Kares to tell me, yes, Kares, but not Malkus. So it's an extra pasuk to tell me there's no Malkus anytime you're Chayiv Kares. To which the Gemara says, now we're going to go back and forth, what is each one, Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva versus Rabbi Yitzchak. So the Gemara says, V'Rabbanan, according to the Rabbanan, i.e. Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, Kares ba'achos elamli. Why do they need a pasuk to tell me that if one has relations with his sister, he's Chayiv Kares? Obviously, it's all part of the forbidden relations, and it says, anybody who does any of these things is Chayiv Kares. So what's the point? Again, according to Rabbi Yitzchak, we understand why it says that. It's come to tell me Kares and not Malkus. But according to Rabbi Shmuel and Akiva, what's the point? So the Gemara answers, Lechalik. The point is, Kares b'achos elamli lechalik, it's to divide. What does it mean to divide? As we're about to see, Uked Rabbi Yochanan, based on Rabbi Yochanan's statement, the Amar Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan said, Shim asan kulam behelam echad. If you did all of these prohibitions, all these illicit relationships, if you did them all in one set, one forgetfulness, so to speak, chayiv al kol achas va'achas, you're chayiv on every single one. In other words, the Rabbanim point out, it says, when it lists all the forbidden relationships, it says at the end, anybody who does all of the above is chayiv kares. Now, what if somebody had relations with his sister-in-law and with his sister and with anybody else, his mother-in-law, whatever, anything else in that list? How do you know that you're chayiv kares for every single one? In other words, there might be a whole bunch of arais of there, maybe there's 20, 25. So if a person does all of them, he's going to be chayiv 25 times. One would not have known that if not for the fact that it singles out, instead of being just a general category of you do all these things, you're chayiv kares, it's telling me for every specific one you're chayiv kares, and therefore you could be chayiv for every single one. Now obviously in regards to kares, well, you can't get kares more than one time, but we know also that you bring a carbon when you do any of these things. You're chayiv a carbon b'shogeg. So therefore what it's saying is that you could even be chayiv, if you do these things, you could be chayiv also for a carbon. You could be chayiv a bunch of carbonas. So Rashi actually speaks this out. So the point is to tell me that you're chayiv on every single one by itself. not just if you do all of them, but even one by itself. Now, the Gemara says, let's read it again. You're chayiv on every single one. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yitzchak, lechalik minole. Rabbi Yitzchak, how does he know lechalik? In other words, the Gemara turns to Rabbi Yitzchak and says, okay, you, Rabbi Yitzchak, you learn from the pasuk of Achoso to tell me you're chayiv kares and not malchus. So how do you know this halacha that you could be chayiv for every single one by itself? The Gemara answers, Nafkale, he learned it out from mi ve'el isha benidas tumaso. A different pasuk. The pasuk says, a woman who's a nida, what do I learn from there? Lechayev, I'll call isha ve'isha, to tell me that you're chayev on every single woman. In other words, the Rabbanan say, Rabbi Yitzchak says, I know this from a different pasuk. The Achoso pasuk is come to tell me specifically kares and not malchus. How do I know that you're chayev for every single one? It's not just if you do all of them in one shot. It's your chayiv on every single one. So he knows that from a different pasuk, which says, El isha benidas tumaso. Rashi explains, it could have said, Lenida lo sikra. Why did it say isha? To tell me you're chayiv on every single woman. It's not that if you do all of them, you're chayiv one. You're chayiv for every single individual act. The Gemara says, okay, v'rabbanan nami. The Rabbanan also, tepik miha. Why can't the Rabbanan learn it out from here? So the Gemara turns to the Rabbanan, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Kiva. They say, why can't they learn it out from there? And that should free up our pasuk about the sister. The Gemara says, in hachnami, you're right. So now the Gemara is backtracking a little bit, and the Gemara is saying, you're right. The word, the isha benidas tumaso, tells me that you're chayiv on every specific one. And if a person does a bunch of these things, he's going to be chayiv. He could be chayiv he's chayiv 8 different times. Not just if he does all of them together, but he's chayiv 8 different ones for every specific one, from the words isha benidas tumaso. So now we're back to the question. So what do the Rabbanan do with the specific pasuk by Achoso to tell me you're chayiv kares? Ve'ela kares da Achoso lamali. So why does it say kares by Achoso? So the Gemara says, according to the Rabbanan, lechayvo, to make him chayiv al Achoso ve'al achos aviv ve'al achos imo. To tell me that you're chayiv if a person had relations with his sister and with his aunt from his father's sister, and his mother's sister, which is an aunt from the other side, that he's also chayiv. If he did all 3 of these things, one might think this is all considered the same isur. So I'm not going to be chayiv 3 different isurim. So it's come to tell me achoso, to tell me every type of achoso you're going to be chayiv. To which the Gemara asks, obvious question, pshita, that's obvious. Hare gufen mechulakim, it's different bodies. Hare shemos mechulakim, and it's different. Shemos is referring to, it's different names of isurim. These are 3 different prohibitions. Sister, aunt, your father's sister, your mother's sister, and your sister. 3 separate prohibitions, 3 separate women. Of course you're chayiv. Well, I don't need a special drasha for that. So the Gemara says, once again, we're stuck. Again, as of now, it's still simple. Everybody holds from the word isha benidas tumasa. We learn for every woman that a guy has an illicit relationship with, he's chayiv. It's not just you could pile up as many as you want and only be chayiv one. No, you're chayiv for every single one. That everybody agrees. Now we have another pasuk by Achoso, which says that you're chayiv kares. According to Rabbi Yitzchak, it's come tell me you're chayiv kares and not malchus. The Gemara says, according to Rabbanan, what do you do with that? Because you actually hold your chayiv malchus also. So the Gemara is trying to figure out what did the Rabbanan do with this. So we tried again, and then we shot that down. Ella, the Gemara says, it's come tell me lechayvo al achoso shehi achos aviv shehi achos imo. The Gemara says, no, what this is referring to is not 3 different women. It's talking about if you have a specific woman who happens to be your sister and happens to be your father's sister and your mother's sister, and he has relations with this woman. Again, it's one woman. One woman, he had one relationship with her, but she happens to be his sister, his aunt from his father's side, and his aunt from his mother's side. The chiddush is that you're going to be chayiv 3 times for that. Even though he did one action, but you are transgressing 3 different isurim by doing that. That's why it says kares b'achoso, to tell me every part of achoso you're going to be chayiv. Now, you may be wondering, how is that possible? How could somebody be your sister, your father's sister, and your mother's sister? The Gemara says, V'hechi mishkachas la, how do you find such a scenario? Birisha'a bar risha'a, a wicked person, the son of a wicked person. What does that mean? So Rashi just explains how this could happen. If you look at Rashi straight across, Rashi says, drop up, Birshai Barishai, Habal Imo. Somebody had relations with his mother, V'holit Shtei Banos, and he then had two sisters, two daughters. Now, these two daughters of his are actually his sisters also. They're his half-sisters. He had relations with his mother. He impregnated his mother. These two children, who are mamzerim, by the way, but these two children, these two girls, on one hand, they're his sister. On the other hand, they're his daughters. Now, v'chazar ubal achas mehem, then this fellow, not only that, but he had relations with one of them. Besides having relations with his mother, he had a relationship with this girl who was born from this, which was his daughter. V'holid ben, and then he had a child. Okay, so you have person A had relations with his mother, then he had relations with his sister / daughter, who had a child. Then that child, Ubah ben, this child had relations with the other daughter who was born. Al achos imo shiachoso ve'achos aviv. That other girl that was born is, on one hand, his sister, on the other hand, his father's sister, on the other hand, his mother's sister. So that's just the scenario Rashi explains. So again, if we'd stop right now, seemingly everything is clear. How do I know every single woman that a person has relationships with, he's chayiv kares for, is chayiv a separate time? That's from Isha benidas tumaso, the extra word Isha. How did the Rabban say, how do I know that you're chayiv for a woman who happens to be your sister, your aunt, and your aunt? You're chayiv 3 times for that, even though you did one action. That's from the kares by chosa. Now, obviously, Rabbi Yitzchak doesn't know it from there because he used it for something else. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yitzchak ha minale. Rabbi Yitzchak, how does he know this? How does Rabbi Yitzchak know this chiddush that this evil person, the son of an evil person, he's going to be chayiv 3 times? Where does he know that from? Because he already used the pasuk of kares ba'choso to tell me that you get kares and not malchus. The Gemara says, Nafkale mikal v'chomer. He learned it out from mikal v'chomer. He has a different source to teach me that if he has relations with his sister who is his aunt, he's chayiv 3 times. Where do we see that? The Tanya, as we learned, there's a Mishnah in Masechta Krisos. Am Rabbi Kiva, Sha'alti es Rabbi Gamliel Rabbi Yeshua, Be'itzliz, by the marketplace, Shel Amiyam, Amiyam is the name of a place, Shahalchu Likach Behema, they went to buy an animal, Lamishta Benosha Rabbi Gamliel, for the party, the wedding of Rabbi Gamliel's son. That's just where the story took place. They asked him the following, Habal Achoso, if one has relations with his sister, Shehi Achos Aviv, which is the sister of his father, Shi Achos Imo, Mao, what's the halacha? Our case. No, mamish our case. Somebody who, it's his sister, his aunt. What's the halacha? How many times he chayiv? Chayiv al kulan, eino chayiv al kulan ela achas. Is it that he's only chayiv 1 on all of them? It's only one thing. It was one action, and it's all considered achos. So maybe it's the sister of your father, sister, your mother, your sister. Oh, chayiv al kol achas v'achas. Or are you chayiv for every single point? You're chayiv for you transgressed 3 different isurim. You did one action with 3 different prohibitions to it. Amrulo, they said back to him, this is all part of the Mishnah. Zulo Shemanu, they said, this we didn't hear. We don't know. They said, we don't know, we never got a Masorah specifically about this specific case. But, they said, Avol Shemanu, but we do know, Habal Chamesh Nashim, Nidos, Behalam Echad. If one had relations with 5 women who are Nidos, in one forgetfulness, in one set of time. 5 women over here, and all of them are Nidas, and this fellow has relations with all 5 of these women. So he transgressed. He did 5 different acts, but it was all the same Isser. It's all, he had relations with a Nida, relations with Nida, relation with Nida, relationship with a Nida, relationship with a Nida. It's all one Isser in the Torah, but it's 5 different women. Shechayev al kol achas v'achas. We know that he's chayev on every single one. He's going to be chayev 5 times. This person transgressed 5 isurim. He's chayev 5 different kareses, so to speak. Now, so they said that's a fact we know. 5 nidas, 5 women nidas. He did 5 different acts with them. He's going to be chayev 5 times. And they said v'nirin hadvarim, and the thing seems mikal v'chomer. We can make a kal v'chomer. Uma nida she shem echad. A nida who is only one Isser. It's all the same. He just repeated the same Isser 5 times. Chayiv al kol achas v'achas. You're going to be chayiv for every single one, even though you just repeated the same Isser. He had relations with neither, relation with neither, relation with neither. He's just repeating the same thing. Still, he's chayiv 5 times. Khan, over here, back to our case of the fellow who had relations with his sister, who's his father's sister and his mother's sister. Sheshlosha shemos, where it's three different names, it's three different prohibitions. Lo kolshkin, is it not all the more so? That's the end of the Mishnah. So the Mishnah is what they answered. They what Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Shua answered Rabbi Kiva in that Mishnah over there. Again, the question posed to him, Rabbi Kiva asked him, what's the halacha if one has relations with his sister, who's his aunt from his father, aunt from his mother, one act, one woman, one act, how many times chayiv? 1 or 3? So he answered, he said it's a kal v'chomer. If he has relations with 5 different nida women, he's chayiv 5 times. Now that's one transgression, it's one prohibition that you did 5 times, you're chayiv 5. So he said, so it's kal v'chomer, if it's one prohibition 5 times, I'm chayiv 5. So 3 separate prohibitions, your sister, your father's sister, your mother's sister, of course you're chayiv 3. So there, that's the source that you're chayiv for all 3 things. You're chayiv for all 3. Now, this is where the Gemara is saying, seemingly, this is where Yitzchak knows this chiddush. So again, if we can backtrack, what did the Rabbanan, let's go back to us, Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva by us, what do they do with the words, the kares bayachos? So it's come to tell me that you're chayiv 3 separate times, you're chayiv 3 individual isurim for the sister, who is your aunt, your father's sister and your mother's sister, you're chayiv 3 times. The Gemara said to Rabbi Yitzchak, how do you know this halacha? So the Gemara said, Rabbi Yitzchak knows it from this kal v'chomer, from the nida case. And therefore he doesn't need a pasuk for it. So now the Gemara turns to the Rabbanan, and the Gemara says, okay, why couldn't you learn it out from the kal v'chomer? The idach and the other one, kal v'chomer pirchu, they say the kal v'chomer has a question on it. It's a very simple question on this kal v'chomer. Again, what are you saying? Guy who had relations with 5 different nida women, he's chayiv 5 times. Kal v'chomer, a guy who had one relationship with one woman, 3 different names, then he's chayiv 3 times. The Gemara says there's an obvious question. Malin nida, what are you proving from nida? Shekain gufen mechulakin. Over there, it's 5 different bodies. It's 5 different physical women. So just because you're chayiv 5 different women doesn't mean in one woman you could be chayiv 5 times. In other words, it's much easier if a person commits an act with woman A, woman B, woman C. I understand, even though it might be the same prohibition, I understand that it could be chayiv 3 different times. But to say in one act and one woman that you're chayiv, that's a very big jump. Who says you could do that? So therefore, what the Rabbanan are doing, the Rabbanan are shooting down this kal v'chomer. They're saying that's a bad kal v'chomer. To go from 5 separate women, which are separate bodies, to say it's so too if it's one woman with one body, she also chayiv 3 times. But why? He only did one act. So the Gemara says, so therefore what? That's why the Rabbanan didn't want to learn from this kal v'chomer. So much so where the Gemara actually says, Uli idach nami, v'idach nami, they change the girsa. The Gemara turns to Rabbi Yitzchak and says, him also, havade kal v'chomer prichu. This kal v'chomer is really good. It's there's a good question on this kal v'chomer. This is a bad kal v'chomer. So the Gemara is asking, Rabbi Yitzchak, that can't not be your source. So the Gemara is asking now, we're back to square one once again. Forget about the kal v'chomer, because the kal v'chomer doesn't work. Because it's much easier to be chayiv 5. Somebody did an act with 5 different women. It's much easier to be chayiv 5 times than a fellow who did one act with one woman with 5 different names on it, 5 different prohibitions. So the Gemara is saying now, you're right, Rabbi Yitzchak will agree to that also. Which brings us back to our age-old question, which keeps coming back, which is, okay, Rabbi Yitzchak, how do you know that a guy who has relations with his sister, who's his aunt, and his aunt, he's chayiv 3 times? You don't know from the kal v'chomer because that's a bad kal v'chomer. Where do you know from? Because you already used up the kares that it says by achoso. You already used up that word, that pasuk, to tell me this. The Gemara says, Ella, rather, nafkale, he learns it out, me'achoso de seifa. He learns it out from the achoso de seifa. Which means, if you look at the pasuk in Vayikra Chaf Yud Zayin, the beginning of the pasuk says, Isha shikachs achoso bas aviv basimo. Right? We go to the end of the pasuk, and then it says, Ervas achoso gila. It threw in the word achoso a second time. So what Rabbi Yitzchak is saying is, the point of the second time it says the word achoso is to tell me that you're chayiv on every single component of achoso. It could be your sister, it could be your father's sister, your mother's sister, you can be chayiv all 3 times. To tell me that you're chayiv all 3 times. That's the point in that word. So Rabbi Yitzchak pulled it out from the end of the pasuk. To which the Gemara turned to Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva and says, the idach and the other ones, meaning Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva, Achoso de Sefer Lamali. Why does it say the word achoso here? Because again, they learned out from the beginning of the pasuk to tell me that you're chayav for your sister, who's your aunt, and your aunt. So why does it say achoso the sefer? So the Gemara says, l'chayvo, that's to obligate you, al achoso bas aviv ubas imo. That's to make you chayav on, specifically, a sister who happens to be your father's daughter and your mother's daughter. A regular marriage where you have a regular sister, a full-fledged sister. Now, why don't you know that? Loimers, to tell me, she'ein onshim min adin, we don't punish from a kal v'chomer. This is something we learned before on Daf Hey on Beis, where we know the part Rashi speaks out over here. We know the pasuk says that the daughter of your mother, if you have relations with the daughter of your mother, you're chayiv kares. We know if you have relations with the daughter of your father, you're chayiv kares. There's no pasuk anywhere that says if you have relations with the daughter of your father and mother, both of them, then you're chayiv kares. Now, we're obviously thinking, of course, right? It's a kal v'chomer. If I have relations with my half-sister from my mother's side, or my half-sister from my father's side, the guy is chayiv kares, all the more so if it's his full sister. But that, we learned once before, that you never make a kal v'chomer to punish people. You ain't onshim min adin, you cannot punish from a kal v'chomer. So a guy who has relations with his full-fledged sister, how do you know he's actually chayiv kares? Where's the source? Show me a pasuk that says that. So the Rabbanan say it's coming from the end of this pasuk. The extra word achoso is to tell me the achoso who's bas aviv or bas imo, you're going to be chayiv for also. So where does that leave us right now? So again, if we could start again. The word isha benidas tumasa, the word isha tells me you're chayiv on every single specific thing. Now, the pasuk of achoso, which we talk about, it says achoso you're chayiv kares. So the beginning of the pasuk it says achoso. Rabbi Yitzchak uses that word to tell me you're chayiv kares and not malchus. How does he know that you're chayiv for your sister who happens to be your aunt? He can be chayiv 3 times. He knows that from the end of the pasuk. Achoso de seifa. The second time it says achoso. Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva don't buy this whole business about chayiv kares and not malchus. Therefore, they say, from the beginning of the pasuk, we know that you're chayiv for your sister, who happens to be your aunt, your father's sister, and your mother's sister. That's the achosa of the beginning. The achosa of the seifa is coming for a whole different thing. It's coming to tell me a full-fledged sister you're chayiv for. So they use up both words of achoso. They don't have anything left to tell me that you get kares and not malchus. Therefore, they hold you get malchus. Now the Gemara turns to Rabbi Yitzchak. You, Rabbi Yitzchak, how do you know this business of a full-fledged sister that you also get kares? Because once again, he used up the first part of the pasuk to tell me kares and not malchus. The second part of the pasuk, he's come to tell me you're chayiv for your sister, who's your aunt and your aunt. So how does he know this? The Gemara says, v'idach, the other one, ibay sema, if you want, I can tell you, gamer onish me'azhara. He learns out the onish from the azhara, meaning, we know in the warning that says you shouldn't do it, Rashi explains there's an extra pasuk to tell me that a full-fledged sister, there's a specific pasuk telling me even a full-fledged sister, not just a half-sister, you shouldn't be having relations with her. So Rabbi Yitzchak just says, I learned out the punishment from there. The same way you get warned, you also get punished for that. That's one answer. So basically the answer is, Rabbi Yitzchak does not need a pasuk to tell me that you're chayiv kares for a full-fledged sister. V'ibay sema, and if you want nafkalei, I could tell you, me'achoso de reisha. He learns it out from the achoso de reisha. He learns it out from achoso, it says the word achoso in the beginning of the pasuk. That's where Rabbi Yitzchak learns it out from. Rashi says, the word besides the fact that it says kares, it also says the word achoso. That's to tell me, it could have just said bas aviv or bas imo. So the extra word achoso is to tell me that you're chayiv. The extra word achoso is coming to tell me that you're chayiv also for a full-fledged sister. So Rabbi Yitzchak really has 3 drashas now. He's got the achosa de seifa, he's got the fact that it says kares there, and he's got the achosa de reisha. To which the Gemara says, v'idach, referring to the Rabbanan. What do they do with achoso de reisha? What do they do with the word achoso in the beginning of the pasuk? The Gemara says an interesting thing. Hahumi baile, they need that lechalik kares lemefatim ulesach. If you take a look at the pasuk over here, interesting pasuk in Shemos Perek Lamed pasuk Lamed Gimel, Perek Lamed pasuk Lamed Gimel. It says, "Ish asher yirkach kamo." This is talking about the Shemen Hamishcha. one is not allowed to make the recipe of the shemen hamishcha, and it says, which was the oil that they poured over the kohanim. So it says, a person who makes this recipe, vasher yite mimeno al zar, or if one puts it on a zar, he puts it on somebody. So if you did one, there's two isurim here. You're not allowed to make it, and you're not allowed to pour it on somebody. V'nichras me'amav, he'll be cut off. Now it's an interesting thing. It says two isurim here. There's two separate things. One is to make it, right? It said before that you're not allowed to make it, you're not allowed to make the recipe. And it also says that you're not allowed to put it on somebody. If you look at the pasuk before that, it says, pasuk lam beis, al basar adam lo yisach, you shouldn't smear it on somebody. Uv maskunto lo sas kamo, and you shouldn't make this recipe. So I have two separate isurim, and the pasuk ends off, v'nichras me'amav, you'll get karis. Now, how do you know you get karis? If I did just one, there's a funny pasuk. It says two different prohibitions, and you get karis. Maybe karis is only if I did both. So now, the Rabbanan say as follows. Let's go back to our Gemara. V'idach, hahu mibayle, I need that. I need the word achoso, l'chalik karis, to divide karis, l'mefatim u'lesach. To divide up, Rashi explains, a lot of times we have an extra pasuk in the Torah. It's not coming specifically for here, but it's coming to tell me something else. In other words, I have an extra pasuk of achoso to tell me that sometimes you can be chayiv karis on different situations. Now it's come to tell me that there's a division of when you're chayiv karis. Each specific act you're chayiv karis. The point was not for the achoso specifically for the sister. The point was specifically for this case to tell me if you just make the recipe or you just smear it on somebody, either one you give me a chayiv karis. That's what the Rabbanan do with the achoso of the Reisha. Good, so the Rabbanan answer that up. Now the Gemara turns to Rabbi Yitzchak and says, okay, Rabbi Yitzchak, how do you know that? The idach, and the other one, Savrak Rabbi Lazar, Rav Osha, he holds like Rabbi Lazar of Yoshia. Rabbi Lazar of Yoshia, Kol Makom Shata Motze Shnei Lavim. He holds anytime you find two lavs, the karis echad and one karis, for example, this pasuk, pasuk has two separate lavim, and it says karis one time. Chalukim hein lekarbon, they are separate in regards to a carbon. So in other words, Rabbi Yitzchak doesn't need it, because Rabbi Yitzchak holds anyway, the rule is anytime you see two lavim in the Torah and one karis, anyway it's split up. Therefore, he does not need the drush of achosa to tell me that. V'bay seima, if you want, I could tell you, lo savar Rabbi Lazar, even if he doesn't learn out from Rabbi Lazar, for nafkale, he has a different pasuk. It says, quote, mi ve'ish asher yishkav etz isha dava. It says a man who has relations with a woman, and he learns it from that pasuk. That's an extra pasuk. I think the word isha is extra to tell me that this is talking about a nida. The point is to tell me that from that pasuk it tells me that you're chayiv karis on a specific act, meaning, once again, not for that specific situation, but for this situation. To which so if we could stop right now, where does that leave us? So again, Rabbi Yitzchak uses the achosa de reisha and achosa de sefer for what he was using. So where does he know this drasha to separate the two lavim in regards to karis? The Gemara is saying either he holds in general, anytime there's two lavim, it's automatically split up for karis, or he learns it from this pasuk. To which the Gemara turns to Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Kiva, what do you do with that pasuk? Because you already know this from the word achoso of the reisha. The Gemara says, V'idach, the other one, how mi baile le Rabbi Yochanan, they need it for Rabbi Yochanan. In other words, they have a separate drasha from that pasuk. Dam Rabbi Yochanan, Shem Yochai. Minayin, how do you know she'ini isha tmei, a woman is not tamei? Ad sheyatsa madva derech ervasa, till she has a flow of blood coming out from her makom erva, from her private parts. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, quote, V'ish ashir shkav es isha dava, v'gila es ervasa. Pasuk says, you revealed her nakedness, end quote. Melamed, this teaches, she'ini isha tmei, the woman is not tamei, ad sheyatsa madva derech ervasa, unless she has a menstrual flow coming out from her nakedness, as opposed to, if it comes out, Rashi says, if let's say she has a C-section or something like that, blood does not come out from her nakedness, but it comes out from her stomach. That is not make her tummy. It's only if it comes out derech erva. It's basically the Gemara saying that they have a different drasha for that. So at the end of the day, everybody comes out the same. Everybody learns out something from everything else. The question is, what do you learn out from where? So if we could review a little bit over here. So what happened over here? We started with the Machlokas, Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva hold there is Malkus by Karis. Rabbi Yitzchak hold there's no Malkus by Karis. How does that start? It starts with Rabbi Yitzchak saying, why does it say the word kares? Why does it even introduce kares by achoso? Why does it say it there? The reason it says it by achoso is to tell me you're chayiv kares and not malchus. Now, Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva do not agree to that. Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva, what do they do with it? Why does it say specifically kares over there? They say it's come to tell me that you're chayiv for every single act that you commit. It's not just if you do all of them together. If you do any specific one, you're going to be chayiv. To which the Gemara says, that you know from somewhere else. We know that from the pasuk, El Isha benidas tumasa. We know that from a different pasuk, to divide from each one. So the Gemara said, you're right, but rather it's come to tell me that you're chayiv. The reason it says kares over there is to tell me that you're chayiv for your sister. First, the Gemara tried to tell me that if one had relations with his aunt, who's a different woman than his aunt, who's a different woman than his sister, but the Gemara said that's obvious. Rather, it's come to tell me that, according to the Rabbanan, the reason it says kares over here is to tell me that you're chayiv for a woman who is one woman, who happens to be your sister, who happens to be your father's sister and your mother's sister. You're going to be chayiv 3 times. That's why it says the extra kares over there. To which the Gemara says, according to Rabbi Yitzchak, how does Rabbi Yitzchak know that you're chayiv for that? If we could fast forward a little bit, right? The Gemara tried proving it from a Kal V'chomer, but at the end of the day, the Gemara said there's no Kal V'chomer because the Kal V'chomer has a question on it. The Gemara says we learn it from the word, Rabbi Yitzchak learns it from the word achoso in the end of the pasuk. To which the Gemara said, okay, according to Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Kiva, what do they do with achos at the end of the pasuk? That's to tell me you're chayiv on your sister, your bona fide sister. That's what achoso, the seifa, is coming for. To which the Gemara said, so how does Rabbi Yitzchak know that? The Gemara says Rabbi Yitzchak knows that because he learns out the onish from the azhara, one answer. Or the second answer is he has another drasha from the word achoso of the reisha. So it's an interesting thing over here. So what comes out is that there's really 3 drashas. According to Rabbi Yitzchak, you have 3 drashas in the pasuk. You have the word kares. Why does it say kares? It's to tell me kares and not malchus. Why does it say achoso in the reisha? Achoso in the reisha is to tell me that a full-fledged sister from both sides, you're chayav for it. Why does it say achoso of the seifa? To tell me this business about the person who's a sister and your father's sister and your mother's sister, you're going to be chayav 3 times for it. To which the Gemara said, what do the Rabbanan do with the achosa of the reisha? They need that to tell me in this pasuk to separate the case of if one just smears the oil or one just makes the oil recipe, he's chayav kares. Why does Rabbi Yitzchak not need that? So either Rabbi Yitzchak holds in general, anytime there's 2 lavim and a kares, it's anyway divided, you'll get kares on either one. Or Rabbi Yitzchak has a different pasuk to tell me that from the words isha benida, from the word isha shirishkav, it's isha dava. And the Rabbanan used that pasuk for something else to tell me a woman is only considered a nida if she has a flow from her makom erva, from her nakedness, not if she has a C-section or something like that, and the blood comes out from there. So at the end of the day, all these psukim are taken up, but at the bottom line is, according to Rabbi Yitzchak, kares does not have malchus with it. According to Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva, it does.